Cool. Yes, welcome everybody. This is the last week of Intro to ComfyUI. Hope everyone's had a good class. It's funny, last week or like during the Q&A session on Thursday, Golan joined and like we just went through a bunch of stuff that he needed to figure out in Comfy. And I kind of realized like that's the best way to teach it, is just be like, okay, what idea do you have? And then let's go and build it together. So if I do this class again, it'll probably be like everyone will have a class, so we'll do this, and then like everyone will be required to meet with me for 2 hours, and we just make a workflow for you. So I feel like that's probably the best way to learn. Like Golan learned a ton, and I learned a lot as well as we tried to go through that. I mean, if you want to do that with me, just hit me up, and we can always do that together. So, but yeah, I'm learning a little bit about that as well. So yeah, I mean, obviously, like if there's anything people want to help build, please reach out to me, and we can try to figure things out. Yeah. Let me share slides real quick for this week as well. I don't have a lot of slides for this week, but there are some nice resources and stuff for this week. Our chat here. Cool, there you go. And let me share my screen. All right, so as obviously mentioned, this is the last week of class. I have two things we're going to do this week. So Jorge shared a really cool video with me sort of sometime last week, and sort of like, how do we do this? And I have no idea how we do it, but I went through it and sort of like did some stuff that are kind of similar. And I think maybe like a cool thing to talk about is just like the process of trying to figure out how to make something that you've never seen before in Comfy. So we can kind of go through that together and just sort of see what I made and maybe like look at some other options. And then as threatened last week, we will do a little bit on custom nodes as well. I tried to build a custom node. I mean, it's easy with a toy example. It's much harder with like a real example. So what we'll do is we'll go through at least a toy example together, and then we'll figure out if that makes sense to keep going from there. Yeah, I think the result we got was pretty cool. So we'll take a look at that. So for anyone that really isn't a programmer, like feel free to duck out at our break, because like we will spend the last hour just like kind of noodling in the custom nodes code. So if that's not really your vibe, feel free to check out. There'll be a recording of it. I won't be hurt if you leave, but for anyone that is interested, we can kind of work on it together and try to figure stuff out. I know some of you are probably better programmers than I am. So, you can read the docs the same way I can and see if you get anything better out of them. As I mentioned last week, Golan and I and Jessica was sort of hanging out with us, figure out how to do a couple different things inside of Comfy. One of the workflows that I have put up in in the workflows folder for us is this one that does segment anything using a guided prompt. It took us a couple hours to figure out, but basically there's a model called segment anything that will help segment certain parts of images. And we attach it to this other model called Florence that allows you to give it a text prompt. So the prompt sort of looks then in the image and try to define sort of the boxes for where an image is, that it sort of matches the prompt. And then that gets past segment anything, and segment anything then goes in and sort of actually makes the mask for it. It's pretty cool. We sort of jammed that a little bit. I might record a little bit more of a video to explain a little bit more. If anyone wants to play with it, it is there, and it works inside Run Comfy. Golan also made one that was using the depth anything tool, which we looked at before. Jessica, I don't know did you save that workflow by chance? I seem to not save that workflow.
Let me see what I downloaded. I have no, I have Chuck Close. Wait, is
Yes,
that
that's the one. Yeah. If you could just drop that in our chat, I can download it and I'll upload it to our workflows folder.
okay? Still image prep
Yeah,
workflow.
yeah, that's the one. Cool. So Golan was he's working on some stuff for this his semester this year, on sort of redoing some of his experiences and using Comfy to sort of do a lot of this pre-processing. And then we can map that to AI tools as well. So a cool thing about Comfy is it's not really just purely an AI tool, like a lot of what we've been using in this class for is that. But you can also do image processing, classifying, like those sort of things. So there's a bunch of stuff here for that as well. So yeah, if anyone's interested, we can play with it. I will keep doing QA sessions until people stop showing up to them. So if people keep showing up, I'll keep doing them. And I'll sort of like drop in our Slack channel when I'm going to do them. And if people want to come, they can. And we'll sort of go from there. As I mentioned, if you also want to do a little one-on-one time, just hit me up with the time you're available and we can figure it out. As I mentioned, sort of since this is the last week of class, I want to mention some other resources. These are sort of a lot of resources that I personally use a lot. There's so much content on like YouTube and like Discord these days that a lot of it can be like, where do I find this stuff or what are the good ones? These are the ones I like, maybe not the best ones, or maybe they work for me and not for others. Run Comfy, if you're going to continue to use Run Comfy, they have a Discord. If you're into bugs or like other errors, there's a support channel there. You can hit them up. ComfyUI, now that's sort of an official company, has an official Discord. So if you're asking for help there, there's some good things there. My favorite by far of all the Discords is this one called Banodoko. Let me just open in Discord here. Okay, so Banodoko is just a cool group of people. This is a lot for anime diff or other animation tools. And in here they have a channel called Show and Tell. And these are all just a bunch of like, I think they're mostly comfy workflows or comfy LoRa's or other things. So like, if you go in here, you can often find also some stuff for collab. There's a bunch of really good resources. Like pretty much everyone I know, like mentioned, just go to Banodoko and like play with some of these tools. There's a ton of stuff here that like we didn't get to. Like there's a lot of other things in here that are really great. So if you're gonna look at any of them, I recommend looking this one, and it's called the Show and Tell channel. It used to be called AD resources. Now it's called Show and Tell. So it took me like 10 minutes to figure out where the channel was. It's a good one. I definitely recommend it to check it out. Let's go back to my slides here. Whoops. There's a guy by the name of Pers on both YouTube as well as on Discord. I honestly probably stole a lot of the material for this class from him or like learned a lot from him. His YouTube is really great. He does like live streams for like 3 hours long, which sounds kind of daunting, but if you play him back at like 1.5 speed or 2 speed, like you can actually see a lot. And he always builds workflows from scratch. Does a good job of explaining them. So he has a Discord, he has a Patreon as well as a YouTube. I'm just a big fan of his work, so I definitely recommend checking that out. I mentioned in previous classes, there's a guy by the name of Latent Visions on YouTube. He's the guy that makes all of the IP adapter nodes, and is also just very familiar with Comfy as a whole. He recorded a new video recently that was on why Flux is different from other tools and looked a lot about how Flux works in Comfy. So that's really good. There's another guy called Olivio Sericus. I don't know if I'm butchering his last name, but also has a YouTube channel, very popular. I would say his stuff is shorter and sometimes can be a little bit like, here's the workflow and not really explaining stuff, but that's still valuable in a lot of cases because just seeing how things work is kind of good. So I'm sure there are many, many, many other resources. And if people have their favorites, please drop them in the Slack. I just kind of want to share like these are my go-tos in a lot of cases. If I don't ask it, if I'm not asking someone like individually for their help, like then I'll usually go on here and just sort of search and see what people are up to. Okay, so maybe for the next 40-ish minutes, I want to go through sort of like reverse engineering, sort of like other AI things you'll see. You know, you probably see a lot on TikTok, Instagram, like other websites. And it's always kind of hard to figure out like how did they make that, right? Like not everyone's going to tell you exactly how they made it or share their workflow with you, but it's kind of fun to just look at people's work and try to like reverse engineer how it works. So as I mentioned, Jorge shared this really cool video of like, I don't know, cats and weird brain matter and people and surgery and like it's like a very fun video. And this is from who is this person? Their name is Kent. So Kent's cooking. And he's got a bunch of really crazy videos like this. But Jorge shared this one was like, how do we do this? And I was like, I have no idea. I think, you know, in their notes, they sort of said, okay, they're making this in ComfyUI, which is good because I think other videos people share with me are like clearly done in like Sora or Runway. And we don't really have access to those sort of tools in Comfy. And then he said he was using trained embeddings with animate diff. So clearly it's an animate diff model. Trained embeddings, there was someone who even asked like what that meant. And we didn't really cover embeddings in this class because they've kind of fallen out of favor. But embeddings are like, I don't know, like you do a training on an embedding, and when you guys back to this embedding file, that's kind of like a hyper prompt. It like has all the right like embeddings and math already built into it to generate the images you want. So if I had to guess, I think what he did here was, I mean, he's also tagging stuff like Midjourney and other things. So if I had to guess, like he probably generated a bunch of like weird images in Midjourney, maybe of cats, maybe of surgeries or other things. and then trained this embedding model on it, and then did stuff in animate diff. We don't really have access to those images, or like I couldn't figure out how to make those images. So I kind of like have gone through a little process of like how I would sort of maybe reverse engineer this or try this out myself. And like, so I'll just kind of walk you through my process of like how I did certain things. And then maybe we'll take one and expand on it a little bit further and see if we get anything cool out of it. Um, so I kind of share this in the Slack channel, but like, here's what I came up with, which is clearly not the same. Um, but I got some brain matter and some cats in there. So I think like it's on the right path. Um, I'll sort of show you how I got to this point and like I'll share the workflow with that we made for this. Um, but I'll just talk a little bit about like sort of my approach to this. So as I was sort of looking at these images, like some of these images really stood out to me as like something's going on here, and that they're like using Perlin noise or like some noise generator to kind of generate these different patches of like brain matter or cat fur or smoke. So this is kind of where I started. Was I was like, okay, I think if I can generate some like noise masks or generate some noise types of things, and then maybe apply either prompts or some images to those spaces, we can maybe generate something interesting. So that's kind of where I started, and was just like, okay, how do I do this? So the first thing I did was I literally just like I went into Google search and I was just like comfy UI masking prompts. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. And there were a bunch of people that basically said it's not possible to do masking using multi-subject prompts, which was kind of disappointing. We did a little bit with masking, got week 1, week 2, week 3, something like that, where you're able to sort of like apply a different image to a different mask. I do find that they generally do not work great. But then one of these here, I think it was actually even this one. Of course, Run Comfy doing their SEO stuff. There was this a mention of this node set from Inspire Pack called Regional Prompt by Color Mask. And I was sort of like, okay, I think I can work with something like that, right? So what I did, and I'll share the workflow, but let me pull up what it looks like in Comfy. And that didn't generate anything, so that's great. What this does, and this is a little crazy, so I'll explain what's going on here, but essentially there's a node called Regional Conditioning by Color Mask. And what it does is allows you to sort of generate a mask. You can then pull the color out of that mask, or like select a mask by whatever color you're looking for, and then you can apply a prompt to it. So in this case, it said something like elderly Asian woman getting her teeth cleaned. The other region was a beautiful cat, very furry. Another one here was pink smoke, and then another one was like medical equipment, surgery, latex gloves. So the idea being that like, okay, if I can make all these different sort of patches of images and then apply them in a masking system, like maybe that will get me what I want. Um, so I won't talk about like too much about how I made the mask, because I just threw it in After Effects and like kind of threw a bunch of masks together and then colorized all of them. And a really like basic thing to think about when you generate masks is like using RGB or CMY tends to be really like a safe range because they're pretty far apart from each other. So being able to generate like a mask like that is pretty helpful. So I made like a 20-second mask in After Effects, I think at like 12 frames per second. So I upload that video. And then I actually tried to feed these images directly into this color masking tool. But it turns out, which is something I probably should have known or realized, but like it took me actually about an hour to figure out what the deal was. Even though these colors in After Effects are set to like exactly red, exactly green, exactly blue, when you compress them and run them through like MP4, they all get slightly off in their colors. And this tool doesn't really allow for like a tolerance. So what I had to do in between all this is there's another tool or another node called Color to Mask, where you can provide the RGB value you're looking to to pull out the color out of this image, and then apply a threshold to it. So basically, you can add a little bit of fuzzy searching to pull out that mask. Then I've got to convert that mask back to an image, because this node expects an image. And then because this generates to a mask, it generates everything to black and white. So in all of these, which is a little confusing, I admit, all of these are now set to white as your mask, because it's looking for basically the individual colors here. So one of these is set to red, one is set to green, one is set to white, and one is set to blue. And I try to run this. the challenge here, and this is always something that I've sort of like learned or like just am sort of generally aware of. The example that they have, let me see if I can find the example. Yeah, it's this example. So I found this image and the sort of their workflow here. And if you look, like, they basically like took an image and they sort of drew over it in the regions they wanted, and then they fed it into the system of, color masking. And their prompts are like black beret, green hair, red hair, trying to generate a woman like hugging another woman. This works well because I think like the prompts aren't that different from each other. In my examples, unfortunately, when I tried to do this in my version, let me just load in the original workflow here. Find it real quick here. This is what my output ended up looking like. Um, Very noisy, very messy. And I kind of think it's like you can see some cats are popping through here. There's a couple reasons why this one might not work so well. One is that in general, masks that are really sort of complicated, like very small little bits of mask, like generally don't actually produce images quite well. Um, so it could be that this mask is too complicated. I need something simpler, which I could have gone back and made, but I kind of just decided to like use this as an example and then like move on. It could also be that I'm trying to combine really too many different concepts and merging them into this combined prompt leads to like this mushiness. It could be I chose the wrong model, could be the wrong seed values. These are all using 1.5. I think this is using LCM, which is also not the best model for generating images. So like a lot of this is kind of going against me, and like why this is still a cool image or a cool video, but not what I was looking to make, right? So it's like I tried this, it didn't really work. I could have kept like sort of noodling on it and seeing if I could get better results by kind of changing some of my variables here. But in reality, kind of what happened is I was just like, you know what, I think there's a better way for me to do this, and I want to move on. Because in general, as I've mentioned before in class, I don't like prompting as like a tool. It's like very annoying to work with. Because it requires a lot of like nuance. And in this case, I think I'm jamming too many prompts together. This is probably where Kent's cooking like something like Midjourney, maybe generating those images in Midjourney or generating those images in like a higher fidelity program that has better prompt adherence. He might have been able to generate those images in a better way in those tools, and then training on that generates the right outputs. Whereas here, I'm just trying to use prompting, and I'm trying to use some honestly like some of the not best models to actually generate that space, and it didn't really work out. So I kind of was like stuck here, and I was like, I think I can do like I personally tend to use IP adapters a lot more. So that tends to be my direction. So I was sort of like, okay, I tried this prompting thing to see if I could get more flexibility out of prompts, but it didn't really work for me. So let's go back to IP adapters. And for that one, what that one ends up looking like, let me see, assuming I can find it here. I think it's this one. So this one I kind of moved into an IP adapter workflow. And we've talked about this before, but the other special sort of thing for this example is, let me just run this real quick so it'll run while I talk. Is so first off, in this case, what I end up doing is I end up just using a black and white mask. And what I think we'll do is if we have time left, I'll actually bring in the color version and we'll try and do it with more images. So this is just a basic black and white mask. Add a little bit of blurring in After Effects. Sometimes blurring adds a little bit of nice, like sort of detail as things swap between the two images. I'm then converting all of my images to a mask. That mask is then sort of being fed to one of my IP adapters. So this one is being fed to, which one is it being fed to? I also didn't do a good job of cleaning this up or grouping anything. Looks like it might be being fed to my cat. So then I downloaded two images just off the internet. I looked for like a cute cat and I looked for a brain. And then what I also did is then I inverted this mask, right? So like the positive mask is being controlled to generate the cat, and the negative mask is being used to control the brain. But the kind of annoying thing is you do need multiple IP adapters. You need an IP adapter for every one of your images you're generating. So in this case, I'm only generating two images, right? So I'm generating a cat, I'm generating a brain. So I need one IP adapter for each. So this is for the, yeah, it's for my cat. So I can actually group these. Let me just make a group here real quick. Let's call this IP adapter 1, call it cat. And then we will create IP adapter 2. Call that brain. And as always, whenever we use IP adapters, we want to use the prep image for clip vision, which just crops and resizes the image to the accurate dimensions you need for IP adapter. So you'll see here, both of these nodes are using the, oh, actually, that's interesting. Well, I can maybe play with that, fixing that. Both of these are using the unified loader as well as the, I think I'm only using the unified loader here for IP adapter. So these are both using the unified loader. So they're both loading in the plus high strength, which just means it's going to match closer to my image. What I could do is I could actually play with this and use like the medium strength. And that might give me like, if you look at that video from Ken's cooking, you get different cats, right? You get different cats and like different people. So by reducing the strength, I might get a little bit more of like flexibility around what the image outputs to. Um, so using IP adapter, using animate diff, just sort of a basic animate diff setup here. And then I'm using the photon LCM model. And you'll kind of see like the output of this. Oh, it's still generating. The output of this, which is that video that I sort of shared in the slide deck, it looks very photon. Photon has that like very plasticky look with like blues and purples. So it kind of has that look to it. I'm actually not using using this prompt anywhere? I guess I am using this prompt. And like this could be a thing where we could kind of maybe improve trying to add other images back in by using the prompt, and then by maybe reducing our weights of these IP adapters. Not really doing anything with negatives. The other thing I'm kind of doing here is like, because I wanted this video to really guide everything, I've got a lot of nodes here that just sort of like map all of this. There's a node called get image size, which if you plug in your image into this, it will give you the height and the width. So then I'm just plugging that directly into our empty latent as well. And then I've got another, oh, this is why it's going to take forever for this to render. I've got another sort of node that I call frame count, and that controls both the batch size of my latents as well as this frame load cap, which grabs however many images we need from this video. So there's a couple of things in here that just sort of help guide all the other things, but I wish I would have realized this was set to 240 before I ran this because it's going to take forever. Okay, we're almost there. And we'll see when we go back to my slides here. This is what sort of I came up with, or like, obviously every random seed is going to be slightly different, but you can see that it does, if you were to actually overlay that mask on top of it, you would actually get pretty close to like, this might be a big white spot and then it disappears, or this might be a big white spot and then it would disappear. And this is kind of like one of the cool things I think about Comfy that is maybe not as readily accessible in other tools is the idea that you can give a lot of input sources and then manipulate them in different ways. This is not like, this would be really hard to do in another tool like Auto 1111 or something. But in this case, because I know I can just load it in a video and then I can sort of play with my video aspects by inverting it or by doing other things, it's like very helpful in the way you can sort of set this up. And if I had put a little bit more effort into this, I could even clean this up to like maybe only the left side just has all the things you need to input, right? So like one of the things we could do is we could change out our images here. Like let me go find, let's find a cute dog photo. So cute dog. So we could download a corgi. And we could swap this out for a corgi. As long as my computer doesn't crash. Of course, Google has started saving out all their videos as AVIFs or all their images. So you have to go and export them. Try this again. For that export too. Cool. It's done yet? Not yet. Almost done. So what we can then do is maybe we can even try something else. Like let's try another texture. Like what if we did cloth texture? Let's make this something that is cuter and less creepy looking. Yeah, sure. Let's try this. Um, cool. Yes, here's where this ended up. Some creepy looking eyes popping out. That's great, actually. Cool. Okay, so let's make the less creepy version of this. Although I imagine it will still be very creepy. I'm gonna set my frame count to much, much smaller so it doesn't take forever to render this. This is a Q prompt. I changed out the model here. So it should be a little bit softer, and maybe I'll get different corgis and different cloth textures because I'm setting the strength to be a little bit less. Well, I still set the clip to be medical horror, so we'll see. Let me just change this, and in case that looks like crap, we'll try something else. Cozy vibes, puppies, uh, sweaters. Okay. Well, we'll see where this goes. Maybe while I wait for this to render, let's talk about if I wanted to upgrade this to the 4-color version. So what I would do then is I could load in that other video. So we'll switch to noise mask colors. And what we'll do then is we'll actually generate a couple more of these. We'll grab these. That down there. So we're going to have one of these for each one of our masks. And what we'll need to do here is we will need to use our color. Is it color to mask? Yeah, color to mask. There's 2 different ones. The better one to use, I think, is the second one. It gives you a little bit better of a range of colors. So for this, we want 4 of these as well. And we'll plug in our images here. And our first one will be white. And I found about 30 is about good for the threshold for this video. So this one will be red. This one will be green. This one will be blue. We could label these as well. Change the title here to color to mask white. Color to mask red. Color to mask green. And color to mask blue. Okay. And then what we want to do here is we need to make sure all of our piping is set up. So typo and white color mask. Thank you. Yes, I do. Thanks. Oh, weird. Why is that? Thanks. Cool. Okay, so we're gonna generate a mask for each one of these. If we want to go crazy, we can just generate a mask preview for each of these as well, just to make sure it's working correctly. And eventually I'll disconnect all this, and we'll figure out how to map these in the right way correctly. Let's see here. Did our cozy guy generate? Oh, that's weird looking. Whoa. That's also creepy. Okay. Well, oh, you know why it is? So this is the other thing is like, sometimes you need to crop into these images a little bit more. Let me just see if I can find a better corgi photo that's a little bit closer up. Yeah, it's a good one. Let's do that. And the nice thing about IP adapters, the image doesn't have to be that large. I think IP adapters by default actually use like 224 by 224 images. That's actually what this prep does. So it can kind of like work out in your favor if you have a low res image you just grab from the internet. All right, let's run this one more time, see if we get a less weird dog wearing cloth as a dress thing, and see if we get something different there. And while we go back and finish this out. Okay, so we've got our IP adapters here. Remember that IP adapters work on the model chain. So you'll actually see here that what I've got from here is I've got our model going into all of our IP adapter setup. And then because we're chaining them one by one, we just connect the first model to the second model, and we're going to connect this one to our third model, and our third to our fourth, and then our last one goes down to our animate diff. And there's some other things we're going to have to plug in here, which is like we're going to have to plug in this unified loader into each one of these. This is where maybe a reroute would help us. So if we plug in our model, this needs to plug in here as well as here. And then we've got the IP adapter one as well. So let's add a reroute here as well. So IP adapter goes to here, and that's going to go into each IP adapter. Cool. And I think we already have our images are plugged in correctly. And all we'll need to do now is plug in the masks into the right ones. So let's say we want our mask from the white to go up here. We want our mask to go in here. And then we'll plug in these masks here as well. So now we have sort of broken our chain from the black and white setup. So I can actually delete all of this. I still want this to go into this and this to go up here. So this way we're still getting our height and width from our video. And that's being passed to the empty latent. And we're still able to control the frame count with this node. So in this case, I can like load in less images than I might need otherwise. Okay, cool. So let's see what happened with our cozier video over here. Oh, that's kind of good. So you see how because we set um the strength of the model and the model weight using that medium setting right here, we're getting like a little bit of a different, we're getting different dogs in every image, which is kind of nice. Um, they're still corgi-ish, but they're not always exactly corgis. And that's kind of like the nice part about loosening some of the strength on this thing to get different images out. I still don't love the cloth texture. I don't know. It's just sort of like not really working in this case. The brains had like a really nice look to them. So maybe we'll go back to that. But you can see how flexible this is, right? Like now we can swap out different images, and we don't need to think about prompting. We don't need to like figure out the perfect prompt for everything. We can just swap out images and maybe play with the strength of each IP adapter, and that gives us more of a flexible output from these videos. So let's go back to our gross little brain thing here. Can I get a brain? No, what did I call that? What is that file? That might take me a minute to find that. What's that file called? Was the latest screenshot? Okay. Great. Good job, Derek. Yep, there's our brain. Our cat image is, of course, called unnamed. So let's go find some surgery images. So surgery. Let's look up pink smoke. See if we can find like some that looks kind of nice here. That's good. Let's do this. We'll see if the watermarking affects things. It might a little bit, but we'll figure that out. It's even an AI generated image. Perfect. We have like a weird like turtles all the way down system here. And what else do we need? We need older woman, plastic surgery. Oh, this is gonna be terrible. Let's not do this. Let's just do older woman. Yeah, let's do this. And we'll upload this one as our last one. Okay. So let me just double check, make sure everything's plugged in correctly. We've got attention masks for each one of these. Maybe let's go back to the high strength for this. And we'll go back to botched surgery, medical, horror, latex gloves, sci-fi instruments. All right, let's see what that does. Let's make that one word, sci-fi. Cool. All right, so let's run this. Again, we're going to do this with 64 frames and just sort of see how that looks. And then like we can play with a little bit more if we want to. And then we can crank up the frames once we've got a little bit of a short video or a short animation that we like. Any questions so far? Oh, I can already see that our masks are not working. Interesting. Oh, because each one of these is set to 10. Let me see if I can cancel this. Okay, well, we'll deal with that in a second. So again, you can see what happens here, and this is why the mask preview is really helpful. You can see that our masks coming out of this are not, they're not really showing up. This one is giving us some little outlines, but not nearly enough to actually generate the blobby shapes. And that's because our threshold isn't high enough. Okay, cool. So let's try this again. Let me just double check, make sure all my other stuff looks good. 1, 1, 1, 1. Oh, okay, let's try this. Yeah, much better looking masks. This video, I believe, is 720 by 1080, which is probably also why it's a little slow on this machine. I'm using a large, so it should be pretty fast. One thing you could also do is if you wanted to um, make a lot of your generations faster, so you could sort of sketch ideas out, you could try either uploading a smaller video or doing like an image scaling thing where you like make the image a little bit smaller. Maybe make it half the size, play with it, make sure it's generating something interesting, and then scale up. The only thing that we're going to run into with something like that would be like you will get very different outputs at a higher scale, at a larger scale, because all these little patches will be so small. At a smaller size, they probably won't render anything. But then as you get bigger and bigger, you will actually get a rendering of like something in those shapes because of how this model works. So that's the only downside with like, there's no way like these are not deterministic systems where like just scaling them up means you're going to get the same image but bigger. Oh, that didn't do anything. That didn't do anything right. What's going on there? Why would that be? I mean, it could be that basically this image is too like where the weighting is off. It could also be, let's see, this one is operating on the white channel. Could be I have a lot of white in my initial image. Just see here. Let me just turn the weight down a little bit. Keep the weight there kind of high. Yeah, all right. Let's just turn the people down and the woman down and see if that helps anything. This also might be, again, because it is SD 1.5 under the hood, it's like the right noise is going to generate the right output. I also wouldn't be surprised if just like photos of people index really high in these models. So having any person in my IP adapter means it's just going to really want to generate people, which is why I try to turn the strength down there. Those renders. Let me just double check what the first. It's not that much white in that first image. If I look at my actual masks, it wasn't that much overall. I think it might just be people just end up really pushing this thing over the edge. Yeah, it really loves people. Okay, let's just skip the person. Let's try to go back to our corgi. So that's not the one I want. I want 360. Okay. There we go. All right. Let's give this one more try and see if removing people. I also don't think like our text prompt probably isn't doing much for us here, just because we have so much else going on with the IP adapters and we've set it to the high strength. So I'm just going to remove that completely, see if that reduces um the sort of over indexing on people. And I just lost my comfy window, so I can't prompt this. So give me 1 second here. Get back to that. Okay, let's try this one more time. It may also be that just having four masks is like too much. Like having four masks all at once on the same screen is too much. Um, One of the things I've seen a lot of people do, like this is the thing that Purs does a lot in his videos, is he uses a mask, but it's often only like it's sort of like a concentric circles where like there's only two masks on the screen at any one time, and it can probably combine two masks better than it can combine four. So we'll just have to see if this works, and if not, we'll go back to like a reduced mask system, just to sort of see what happens there. But I kind of love this process of using noise to generate these things because it's already weird enough as it is. And the noise just makes it like makes the bodies shift in very strange ways. I kind of love that transition there to like oof, then that weird face. So there's something interesting here about like sort of guy again, so much of what I try to do is avoid using prompting. So like having a video like sort of, manipulate a lot of the space and then just using IP adapters sort of control different things is kind of an interesting technique. And I find like is way less like crazy making to me than trying to figure out the right prompt for everything. Yeah.
Derek, would you say your sort of general approach is just prompting is really just for the surface and everything else is like 90% of the workflow is structure through all of these like analog
Yeah.
processes?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like using IP adapters, using control nets, using video to guide a lot of stuff. So you just get better results. It looks like shit. I have no idea why that would be. It might just be that we've like jammed in too much stuff. I mean, it looks kind of cool as a visual effect, but it's definitely not doing anything with IP adapter right now. Gonna try one more thing and then we'll call it a day here. Let me just turn everything down strength wise. And I've got this set to high. Yeah. All right. Well, let's give it one more shot. What I recommend we do is let's take a break. I'll render this and then we'll come back and see if it works any better. And if it doesn't, I'll do another little play around and see if I can get any better results. Maybe it is just like four is too many for the system. But we'll see. So let's come back in 10 minutes. So we'll come back at like five after. I'll show you what I did, and then we'll also jump into making a custom node in Comfy. So again, if that's not your vibe, like feel free to duck out and take the next hour for yourself. I will record that session still, but if you want to hang around and just sort of see how to write code to generate some of these nodes, we can do that then. Cool. All right, see you right in 10 minutes. All right, I made no progress in the 10 minutes that that we were gone. In fact, I feel like it got worse. Like I just kept getting more and more people, which led me to believe that maybe something is up with like one thing I noticed. Golan and I were working a lot during our Q&A last week was that like certain things were just sort of getting stuck in Comfy, and we had to restart Comfy to like basically like sort of kick some of that crud out and then restarting. So I'm doing that now to see if that helps. Um, I'll keep kicking on this sort of workflow, and if I figure it out, I'll like save it and share it with everybody in our channel. Because this should work. Like there's no reason that I should be getting people when my IP adapters have no people in them. But we'll sort of see where that goes. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and jump into working with writing custom nodes. So I'm also going to try do this in a minute. I'm going to try to work from my Linux box. I've never run Zoom on that machine, so we're going to see how that works. But in the meantime, let me walk through a little bit of our what we're gonna do in our slides here. Cool. All right, so we'll come back to that guy in a minute. All right, so custom comfy nodes. We're gonna attempt to make one of our own today. It's the first time I really tried it this week. So I got a toy example working. I basically got an example of like rotating an image in the tool working. So we'll look at basically doing that, and then maybe if we have time left, we'll figure out like, can we add something to it? Can we make something really cool with it? But a lot of it comes down to like the functionality within the node, right? And that's just sort of different things if we're working with models, working on other things. So we'll look at that in a minute. There is a website on Comfy's docs page about how to use this. This walkthrough, I will tell you right now, is terrible. Like it does not like it's good in the code samples it gives you, but the actual structure of the files is not really one, it's not even defined here, and two, it's not correct. So I found a different video that explains a little bit better. So we'll start with that. But yeah, if you go through this walkthrough video, just know, or like this walkthrough doc, just know it like doesn't make a lot of sense, which was really frustrating when I first did it. So the other thing I don't recommend doing this is it's probably impossible to do this on Run Comfy. Like you basically are going to constantly be restarting your Comfy server. So that's why we're going to run it off my Linux box where I have Comfy already installed and I've got a code editing system, that sort of thing. So I'll walk through doing it on there. This might be one of those few cases where I would say, like, especially on a Mac, installing locally might be good. If you're not doing a lot with the GPU and you're not actually generating images, but you just want to make sure your node is working correctly, then maybe installing it locally is the best way to do that. So you can do debugging and you can write your code and then run it a couple times to make sure the node is working. And then pushing it to the cloud or uploading it to Run Comfy once you've got it figured out. There's this video. I'll put a link to it in our syllabus, as well as it's embedded here. It's from this YouTube account called Code Crafters Corner. And it's about a 30-minute video, and it walks through like basically cutting and pasting things from various parts of the code base to generate your own custom node. This was far more helpful for me than the walkthrough was. So if you're really interested in this, hopefully I'll cover most of it, what he covers in his video like today. But if you are interested in like going back and looking at it, like I think his examples are much easier to understand than what is in the walkthrough document.
Hey guys, how are we doing?
See. Okay, cool. So obviously, like for this, you also probably need to learn how to read a little bit of code. You can probably get away a decent amount with using Claude or ChatGPT as well. But the nice thing about this is that the nodes.py document, which we'll look at in just a minute, which is basically all the built-in Comfy nodes, is quite readable. And you can copy and paste from like what they're doing in those nodes. So in the case of like you wanting a conditioning output, you could go in there and see how the conditioning text prompt node works and see how they're outputting stuff from there, like how they convert some into conditioning output. You could copy and paste from there. I'll probably start by just working with the image node, like an image in and image out node, because it's quite easy to do that. But there are lots of other inputs and outputs for these things, and I think that nodes.py document is probably the best place to start. Okay, cool. So let me try and get my Linux set up here. I'm already logged into Zoom. But let me just see if I can switch screens here. This down here. This might take me a minute, sorry. All right, I need to stop sharing from here. Oh, I need to share from here. Let's try this share. Everyone see Comfy from here now? All right, great. Okay. I need to figure out my other screen situation real quick. So let me do this. Drag this down here. Okay. All right. So the first thing that we need to figure out here is how do we actually like start to build up our system, our file system here, right? So inside of ComfyUI, let's go to our files here. So inside the ComfyUI folder, all of your custom nodes get saved into a folder called custom nodes. Thankfully, that's named in a way that's totally coherent. So if you go into custom nodes, you'll see here that any node you've installed locally or installed in Comfy will show up here. So for example, we install a lot of the animate diff stuff. We've installed Chris tools, we've installed Fizz nodes, IP adapters, like all of that is here. So the first thing we want to do is basically like start with sort of a naming convention. Like a lot of this stuff needs to be named uniquely. So like what I would probably do is I'd come out in here and I would generate a new folder for myself. And let's just call it like my initials. Oh, there we go. Okay, clearly this is running a little bit slower, so it's just got to give it some time. So I just named something like my nodes, essentially. You will also see that if you're looking at it locally, there's probably also a file here that is named something like this. It might be like example node.py.template or .example. I forget exactly what it is, but that is essentially a really simple example file. And we'll open that and we'll look at that. And that will give us sort of some of the code that we're going to need to work from. So that you can basically, if you want to open that, you can just remove that .example or .template or whatever it's called, and then just leave it, convert it to example underscore node.py. And if we open this, we'll see here that at the very top, there's like a bunch of sort of code here, and we'll work off this. Oh, this is all stuff I added. So let me remove this. So basically, we're going to create a little folder structure for ourselves, and we're going to build up an example node for ourselves from here. So inside of this folder, let me cancel and quit out of Comfy. Let me clean up our space here a little bit. Wait, I can tell this old machine is at a slog in Zoom. Okay. So what we're going to want to do is, let me add a new tab here, and we'll go cd custom nodes, and we'll go into here. So the first thing we want to make is we're going to make a init file. So we'll just create an init file. Init. This will basically allow us to initialize all of our nodes. So when it loads, it finds everything correctly. And then we want another file that we're going to call like our actual, this is going to be the actual node. So the way this looks, if you look at the other folders, like you'll see there are multiple folders inside of those, and each one of those is its own node. You can also make individual files, and those would each be one of your nodes. So let's make our like node file here. I'm just going to call it image rotator. Okay, so we've made a couple of those. Let me just see. Where'd my chat go? Okay. Give me 1 second here because I can't see the chat in any of this. Okay, cool. I think we're good. If there's stuff that I'm not seeing in the chat that is important, let me know. Okay, cool. So we now have our file structure here. So if I go into my nodes here, I've got 2 files. So I'm going to open each one of these in Sublime. Doesn't really matter what text editor you use. Okay. So I've got 2 empty files and I've got my example node. And if we go through our walkthrough, this is where the walkthrough doesn't really explain like how like the file structure needs to be set up. But we can see here that the first thing we need to do is in our main node, in our main node file, we want to create a class. And that class will give us sort of like a category, and we'll talk about each one of these as we work through it. But this will define sort of what are the requirements of this node. So I'm just going to copy this. We'll edit it a little bit and we'll go through each node or each line one by one. So this gets pasted into your main node file. So I've got a class here called image selector. I'm going to rename this to image rotator. And this category is in Comfy, when you click and you could do the add node thing, there's sort of that node tree of different folders. I'm gonna like make my category. I'm gonna make my category my name. So we'll just call DVS nodes. That way I can find it very easily when I'm looking for it. Next is the input types. So in this case, what I actually want both of these. So my input type is that I need a required image input. And then my return type, which is the output type, is also going to be an image. So this is going to say, like, I must have an image input. So the wire must go in with an image, and then the out will also be an image. We can look at other examples or other things that you could do input output. So actually what I would say is maybe in the next 10, 15 minutes, I'll build the basic node. But then if people have ideas for other nodes, we can look at how to expand those. Most of you just reading through documentation and trying to figure it out. So if you have an idea, like, we can figure that out together. And then the function, this is going to be our main method that we're going to use inside of this class to actually do the thing we want to do. So in this case, I would actually say, let's say rotate image. We'll call our method rotate image. Okay. So now we basically have our basic definition here of what we're looking for. So we're going to stick our node inside of a category called DVS nodes. We're going to ask for an input that is an image, and we're going to return an image output. So often what we also need to do is we need to add additional pieces into the functions. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for a rotation function. And basically what I did is I just Googled, like, how do I rotate something in PyTorch? So remember that, this is a machine learning program. So most of what's going to work with this tool is, this is all PyTorch based. So you wouldn't use TensorFlow, you would use PyTorch. In the case of image changes or like image functions, you would probably use something like Pillow. Pillow tends to be the main image tool that people use, or image library that people use in Python with this stuff. So it's not OpenCV, it tends to be Pillow, which kind of frustrates me because I'm an OpenCV person. But I found this example here on the PyTorch website. I can get my screen to move to the right place. As bad as I think the Slack, the Zoom functions are on my computer, they're even worse here on Linux. Okay, which is not surprising. So there's this function here called torch rotate. And actually, I found this through Claude. This is where I looked. I just basically asked Claude, like, hey, how do I do this stuff in PyTorch? So I said, in PyTorch, how do I rotate an image in 90-degree increments? And it gave me this code, which I initially thought was wrong, but is actually correct. So basically, we're going to copy our libraries here. So we want to use the torch library, we want to use the torch vision library, and then we want to use the pillow library. Pillow is always shortened to PIL in Python. So we'll copy this code here. And I'm going to paste this at the very top of my node file. If you're working with like a really weird library, like, I don't know, maybe there's some library that only does image rotation, there's a chance that it wouldn't come installed with Comfy. And then you would have to add that library to your requirements so that when it gets installed into Comfy, it also installs that library. I can say with like 99.9% certainty that Torch Vision, and PIL or Pillow are going to come pre-installed in this library. So that also is like why I'm not really venturing too out into the craziness, because adding libraries is also kind of a pain in the ass through the system. So in this case, I know these are going to be installed. Okay, so let's go back to our walkthrough here. So we've built out our basic setup here. We've included the libraries we need. And then what we want to do is we want to define our function. Now, this is not the right function, but I'm going to copy this here just so we can see how it all works. So we want to define our method here. So remember that we've got the function here. Function actually refers to a method, but regardless, like, it's called function in Comfy. We then need to name this function to match this. So this is basically saying this is the thing we're going to do that allows us to do everything we want to do inside this node. In this case, I named it rotate image. So here we're going to provide it rotate image. And we'll see here that our inputs are images, right? We have fed in a input called images, and now we can do something with those here. So this is where I'm going to delete this. I'm going to leave the results or the return here, because what we want to do is we want to return something that is also an image. So we'll make sure that we are also in our method returning an image back out. So I'm going to go back over to Claude. And basically the way we do this, we're going to make one version that does the simplest thing possible, and then we'll add layers to it as we go through it. So in this case, I'm just going to let's just rotate our image 90 degrees, right? So we'll copy this, which is our 90-degree rotation. The way Torch works, if you want to read about it, is over here. And it's basically like it rotates in 90-degree increments, and you need to provide that increment to it. So this is torch.rotate90. You pass the image. The K equals how many times you should rotate it 90 degrees. And the dimensions are just to make sure it is operating on the right sort of matrix as it generates. So we'll copy this. And we'll come back over here and we're going to paste that in here. And sorry, let me turn off my notifications. Cool. Okay, so what we want to then pass in is we want to say result equals. And we need to then pass in, oops, that pasted in twice, of course. We need to pass in our images. So remember, images is what we get in. And you might be kind of confused because the input is only ever one image input. But remember how with video, when we output the image from our video, it's actually a batch of images. So all of Comfy expects any potential image to be multiple images, like a batch of images. In this case, what we're going to do is we're only going to give it one image, which will be a batch of one, but it'll be many images. So you just have to remember that this could always be multiple images. And I think torch.rotate90 will also take in a batch. I cannot click on this for the life of me. Input. Yeah, it can be a tensor, which means it'll be a batch of images. So this will be fine for us. Let's go ahead and save this. So this is our basic function. There's really not much to it, but it's enough for us to get going. So we can run this. And then the last thing we need to do if we go through our walkthrough is we need to basically deploy this or publish this. And that is with this command here. So what we'll do is, and this is actually easier to grab from our example. So we go to the example node and you go all the way down to the bottom here. There are two files, or there's two things here, which is basically the node class mappings and the node class name mappings. So we'll copy this code and we'll paste this into our init file. And then we need to figure out, I never remember what the actual order this is. Okay, so the node class mappings are the name and then the function or the class of what we're using here. So let's go back over here. So we want to use, for our node class mappings, we're going to use image rotator. This is sort of the pretty name of it. And then we want to get our class name, which is this. And we'll paste this in. And then we want to, what they say to do in the workflow is they just say to do all equals this. So let's just do that. That's the lazier version and easier to remember. Yes, and thank you. Yeah, I will need to import it. That is the other thing that I need to do here. So you'll see here at the top is it needs to be imported. So for this, what we'll do is we'll need to import that class. So for this, we'll copy this line and we'll paste this here at the top. And we need to say from image rotator, we want to import image rotator. The nice thing is the example node shows you can do it all in one file. The reason you might want to sort of like do two files is like, let's say you want to add more nodes. It's easier to find everything like multiple nodes here from one file than try to like, basically you would have to like create a different folder for every, or like create a file for every single node you want to run. Then you have problems of like sharing different types of things, like that sort of thing. So basically like this allows you to sort of like expand this further into more nodes, which is kind of why it's helpful to do it this way. Let's go ahead and hit save here. And I'll save out this one as well. And I think now we're actually ready to go. So again, if we look at our folder structure over here, we've inside of custom nodes, I've made a folder called DVS nodes, and I've made my image rotator and my init file here. So now with all this, I think we're actually ready to run this. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Cool. Yes, we're good to go. Okay, cool. So let's go back to Comfy. And for this, all we need to do is start Comfy. So make sure Comfy's off when you run this. Basically, every time Comfy needs to be turned off, and then you turn it on every time you want to rerun your nodes, because it does cache everything. So like if you make changes while Comfy's running, it won't actually pull in those changes until after you've like stopped it and started again. And then what we want to look for here is inside of this loading system, it should show me. There we go. So it took 0 seconds and I didn't get it. See how there's an import failed here? That means something's wrong with that node. That probably means just like an out of date node and I need to update it. But in this case, it imported DVS nodes without a problem. I didn't get any import errors. Again, this is where like you couldn't do this on Run Comfy. It would just take forever. You would basically be flying blind. It would be really annoying. So now this is running. So let's go ahead and open this in our Comfy server. I can actually go to Comfy up here. And I've already set up sort of what I want to do. So I'm going to delete this node here and I'll delete my preview image. So basically what I want to do is I want to have an image encoding system here doing image to image. But every once in a while, you upload an image or you download an image and it's like rotating correctly, or maybe you just want to play with rotating the image around to see if that affects the image generation. So what I want to be able to do is add a node here that allows me to rotate my images and then see what the output looks like. So for this, what we're going to do, I'm just going to come over here and hit refresh. That should refresh my Comfy system. And then again, the way you can check to make sure this is working correctly is you'll click in your canvas, you'll say add node. And then what I should see here is I should see, of course, these are not in any sort of alphabetical order. So here's DVS nodes. And then if I open this, I see image rotator. So I clicked on this and you'll see I have an image input, image output. So let's plug this in. And if I add an image preview node, I should also be able to see my image preview. Let's go ahead and run this. And sure enough, it rotated my image 90 degrees counterclockwise. So wasn't that hard to build a very basic functionality, but what if I want to build this to be like a little bit easier to understand, right? Because I only have one rotation right now. What if I wanted to rotate my setup into 3 different directions, right? So 90, 180, 270, right? How would I go about doing that? So this is where we need to then look into our nodes and the example node to add more. Basically, we want to add all these this sort of stuff, right? So we want to have some drop downs, some selections. I don't know, maybe we could blow this out and like do some like crazy other thing with it. Like it'd be interesting to see if we could even like maybe combine that like Florence like masking system in with all this. We could do a lot, but we also only have like 30 more minutes in class. So let's just look at a couple like simple examples of how to blow this out here. So what I would love to do is be able to select the exact rotation I want here. So 90 degrees, like technically what I could do, this would be like a really dumb way to do this, but I could technically like chain a bunch of these together, right? Like this would completely work for me if I had no idea how to do anything more. Whoops, there we go. Control C, Control V. Oh, too many of these. Okay, delete. So if I want to be really, really hacky, this would work. But again, we should be a little bit cooler than this. So let me delete this, and we'll come back to this where we want to actually be able to select the rotation amount. So for that, let's go to our example. The example file has some nice stuff in it just to sort of read through. So here's all the return types you might, or certain types. So it basically describes the attributes of your main class. And then you'll see there's also a return type here as well. So in the return types, in this example, there's an image input, there's an integer input, there's a floating decimal input, there's a selection input. This is what we're going to want to grab. We're going to want to grab these selections. And then there is a string input. And this allows you to either do a single line input or a multi-line input. So in the case of something like a text prompt, a conditioning text prompt, you would set the multi-line to true, and that would give you like a bigger field to work with. Because I was already playing with this earlier. What I actually want is something like this. But let's just say this wasn't here. Let's just delete this. And I want to go back and try to figure out how to basically build this ourselves. So this is like sort of a, it's not even a toggle. This is like a drop-down menu essentially in a UI. So if I copy this over, and then I paste this into my main function here, right? So we need to define the input types. So we can see here that our input types are required of this. Did this define input types like that? This return, this is the return. Interesting, it didn't define a required input. Well, it's because it's not an input, right? So this is a return, what we want to return. So we're going to return these values. So we'll stick these not in the input, but in the return functions. Let me make sure I set this up correctly with the right. Return. No, this isn't input types. Yes, okay, so see how we got the return here? So what we're going to do is, I guess we can add this to the required. I think it would need to be in the required. So what we'll do is just give ourselves some indentation here to work with. Okay, so let's paste this in here. And we want to name this. This will actually be visible, right? You can think about this as the sort of the seed value. Actually, this would be the sampler name value, right? So when we click on the sampler name value, we see all the options we have here. So we want to give this a name that is like both one, it needs to be an ID, or like it needs to be basically underscores instead of spaces. So it needs to be like machine readable. And then we want to provide our options here. So we'll go over here and we'll say rotation. And then we've got a couple options here. So we've got the option of 90 degrees. We've got an option of 180 degrees. And we've got an option of 270 degrees. And I think, I haven't actually confirmed this, but I'm fairly certain these have to be strings. I haven't seen an example where this isn't a string. So I think in that case, we're going to have to pass as a string and then do some math to like turn it back into a non-string. Okay, so we now have this rotation value that is now available to us as well. So this needs to be passed to our function or to our method as well. So we'll copy this and we'll add this to the end of our function. So now we get the rotation element. And what we want to do with the rotation element is we're going to say ROTK. This is like this is for this K value, right? So this K value is how many rotations of 90 degrees should we do? So in this case, we want to figure out how to turn this into a value that is either a 1, 2, or a 3. So the best way to do this would be to turn our string into an integer and then divide it by 90 degrees. So when it's 90, we get a 1. When it's 180, we get a 2. And when it's 270, we get a 3. And then what we would do is we'd pass this value into here. And I can never remember how Python handles dividing integers. So just for my own sanity, I'm going to wrap an int on this just so it doesn't turn into a float. I think it'd be okay, but you know, always cautious with Python. Okay, so I think this is good to go. So we're now going to have a special rotation field. We're going to convert that rotation into one of these K values, and we're going to pass it through. So let's go ahead and save this. So now we want to go back to Comfy. We're going to turn Comfy off. We're going to restart Comfy. And it looks like I screwed something up. Import failed. Why would that have been incorrect? Oh, I see what happened. Okay. Typo. Yep, thank you. All right, try that again. Cool, and that time it read correctly. So let's go ahead over here. You need to hit refresh. If you aren't going to like open or close your browser window, then you need to make sure you hit refresh every time you restart Comfy so it pulls in the right updates. But you'll notice here that actually this node is still wrong. As you add elements to your node, you do need to basically delete them and bring it back in. Otherwise, it keeps sort of the metadata and it doesn't show like the latest version of it. So let's delete that. We'll come back over here. We'll add our node back in. And we'll say devious nodes, image rotator. We'll plug this all in correctly again. And let's see. All right, so we've got 90 degrees. So this image shouldn't change. That's right. And then we've got 180. Should be upside down. That works. And now we've got 270. There we go. Cool. Okay, so that worked. Great. We're done, right? So, you know, there's a ton more here. Like, there's this really interesting node that Golan and I were looking at. It's called the points editor. Why is it not loaded here? Let me see. I probably need to install it. But like essentially, like this is the really basic way to use Comfy, right? Like it's just having a set of different inputs, and you can grab from the example node here. Like this is how you do integers, this is how you do floats, and this is how you do strings. And this is how you do options. I don't know, did they wonder if they have an option here about how to do I don't know if they have an option for toggles. It's got to be somewhere. We have to go and find the node. Oh, that's the other thing I should show you. So if you go back to ComfyUI, You scroll down here, you'll see there is a file called nodes.py in the main Comfy folder. And if you open this in your code editor, you'll see there's quite a lot here, but each one of these classes is basically the built-in nodes. So this is how they do clip text encode. So the required elements are an input of the text, a clip loader, right? So we need to plug in the clip, and then it returns a conditioning thing or a conditioning output. And you'll see what it does. It takes your text input, converts it to a token, and then it outputs as an encoded, and then you send that to your output. So actually, when you use conditioning, you actually get two things being sent out: your conditioner as well as your output. So let's see if there is one. I'm trying to think if there's any node that I can think of that have a toggle in them in the base setup of Comfy. I can't think of any, but let's actually look at then. So basically, this is a great learning tool. You can go through and read how each one of these is done, and copy and paste your heart content, which is really nice. And this is very readable. Like I am kind of shocked at how readable all this stuff is, because really not doing that much. But it's kind of beautiful seeing it broken down like this. Like when you look at the diffusers library, like so much stuff has like multiple steps that it's really hard to read. But this being broken down into very small bite-sized functions is really nice to be able to read. I mean, this looks a little bit crazier. So V8 encode for inpaint, model conditioning, saving latents. Wait, is there a let me think about what node has a toggle in it. So I think is the IP adapter node. Or wait, the load video does. Load video. Oh, it doesn't actually. So some people use a toggle and some people use the disabled enabled function. So again, I have to go and dig in and figure out how to do toggles. Again, the documentation here isn't great. So all this is happening on the Python side. And maybe data types, what I'm looking for. Combo, int, float, string, image, latent, mask, noise sampler, sigma, guided. Okay, I don't see anything there. So basically anything you want to do that is just purely like, within sort of the drop-down menu, that's all handled in Python. And that would sort of be what they call server side. And then on the other side, if you were to do like a crazy UI tool, that is all handled using JavaScript. So this is where I was trying to show the points editor tool, where it like allows you to upload an image and then drag some points around in it. That's actually a JavaScript front end tool to actually do that manipulation. And then you need to talk between JavaScript and Python to actually have those two things work in tandem. So let me actually see if I can find what the points editor is. Let me just grab this here real quick. Oops. Close that. Go back to Chrome. Okay. I don't need this anymore. Okay, so the UI points editor. Yeah, so this one. So we install KJ nodes. Do I really not have KJ nodes installed? That'd be kind of interesting. Let's go to manager. Let's go to custom nodes manager. Let's go to KJ. This might have been the one that was broken. Let's try an update. Restart. So KJ nodes now set up. Let's refresh our browser here. And let me show you what the points editor looks like. Points editor, yep. Cool. So the points editor is, this was a tool you can use with the segment anything. What it allows you to do is let's load our image in here. And let's do an image preview. Really, I can't do that. JSON error expected a value. Well, that's a bummer. I can't show. I would love to figure out how to hook this up. I might hook it up and show you in a different place how it works. But if we actually go to KJ nodes, let's see if there's a version of this that I can show. Here's how I can show this. So we'll go workflows, go to so this is the points editor. There's this really cool tool where basically you'd like add a point, and what that allows the segment anything tool to figure out from there is like basically what object you're looking for, and then it tries to figure out what the best mask of like what that object is. But this points editor, it basically gives you like a red dot and a green dot, and you can move the dots around to sort of say like the green dot is where I want the thing to be, and the red dot is where I don't want the object or the mask to be. But like to actually move this node around, or essentially to play within this node, you need to do it using JavaScript. And then you need to basically like on execution, you need to pass the JavaScript values back to Python. And that stuff gets a little crazy and honestly is probably a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. So it would take me a little bit longer to do that. But you'll see here, there is documentation for what you need to do on the client side. Basically, you have to like publish the app, and then it's a little bit beyond me, to be honest, but that's how you would make this work. So it's like JavaScript for that front end sort of like tooling, and then Python for all the backside server side stuff. And there's a way to communicate between those two. So what I was going to do is let's actually look and see in the custom node for KJ nodes. Custom nodes. Let's find KJ nodes. And we've got in our folder, we've got the nodes. And then in here, let's see, what does he call the points editor node? So the points editor is the class of points editor. Okay, let's try and find this. Okay, so go into nodes. Maybe it's one of these. Okay, there's a lot of tools in here. I thought this would be easier to find, but apparently there's so many tools in this library. Let's try this one real quick. Okay, so it's not in there. Is it in this one? What we're looking for is points editor, right? Man. It's in curve nodes. Okay, interesting. Curve nodes. There we go. Okay, cool. So, so you can see there's a bunch of stuff that we're returning from here, but I want to see is where the front end for all this is. This is all back end, but how do I communicate with the front end? So let's see, KJ nodes, web maybe. Yeah, so this is our green dot, yellow dot, and then point editor. Okay, cool. So yeah, so here is all of the functionality for using that points editor and moving things around. So again, I'm a little rusty at JavaScript, but this sort of shows you that like the actual interface you interact with is built in JavaScript. And then you have to pass all this data from your JavaScript application to the Python application, and then you use the Python data to actually do the segmentation or pass it to the segment anything model. So again, we will definitely not be covering this in the next 5 minutes, but this just sort of shows you that like the nice thing about enough of this, because it is open source, is you can go in and sort of dig around and sort of see how someone else is doing something. And then if you are like, this isn't really like, I want to do this one thing, but change it a little bit, you could obviously like copy and paste their code and make edits for yourself. So I would definitely recommend, like, if, we've sort of jokingly said like, oh, maybe like we don't like this, the way this one thing works, let's edit it. It's a great example to just be like, let's actually go edit it. So we go and find that and do that work. So this is kind of how an interface inside of Comfy works. And then I don't know where the communication would be between these things. Maybe the KJ Web async. There's documentation in the Comfy docs here about how to do client server messaging or routing. Yeah, so you add some listeners to the JavaScript side, and then you would pass that on execution to the Python backend system. So we built a very dumb, very simple example. But I think, for those of you that are really interested in this, I think it gives you a head start, or at least like helps explain sort of the file structure so you can go from there. Because that basic walkthrough is really bad. But I think the rest of these documentation setups are not terrible, and or there's good examples of what other people have done to sort of be able to go and work from there. So I think that's enough for this example. Sorry, it was basically just me like digging around in other people's files, but I hope it gives you at least a good start into some of these things and gives you some ideas on like what you could do fairly easily. And then other stuff that's gonna be a little bit harder, like basically anything that starts to play with latents or other things, you would need to like understand how Torch works and that sort of thing. But there's a lot of good examples of that. And I would also say, like, in those cases, Claude's probably a really good example to like actually just ask for help and like get some things back from it. And you might be able to like sort of tie some ideas together in order to make that happen. Cool. I think that'll sort of be it for this session. Any other questions about this? I'd be happy to talk about it more if anyone wants to, like in our Q&As. Cool. All right. I think that pretty much wraps up our last class. So just want to say thank you, everybody. This has been a lot of fun. Like, I've really enjoyed this class in particular. Like, probably just because having a good group of people with questions, and then also getting to explore fun things that aren't just like purely collab notebooks. It's like nice to play with an actual visual tool. So I will keep doing some Q&As. Also, if you have questions, just drop them in the Slack. I'm happy to try to answer them async as well. And then, yeah, we'll keep doing Q&As until people are like no longer showing up to them. But yeah, thank you. This is really, really fun. And I hope people got at least something out of it. And I hope, like, one, also, like, please give me feedback if there's anything that didn't work in the class or things you really did enjoy. Like, please just message me with that. I'm always happy to take good feedback on ways to improve in the future. I'm not yet sure if, I will probably teach this class again in the near future, but I don't know how soon or not. But yeah, I hope you found this really helpful. All right. well, I'm sure I will see everyone around Slack and or the internet. Yeah, so I hope that this was really helpful, and I'll see everybody soon.
Thanks, Derek.
Yep, bye everybody.